Hello. So, what if the key factors contributing to most widespread health dilemma are hidden in plain sight with our daily habits and choices? Stick around as we uncover the less obvious culprits behind insulin resistance today. So, today we're going to dive into what causes insulin resistance. We know it exists. We know it's here. You're going to hear a lot of people giving you bad information about what causes it. And we're actually going to drill into the scientific reasons behind it. But don't worry, I'm not going to get too techy. Keep it pretty light and easy to understand. And if you need more details, just let me know. So, make sure that if you are watching this on something other than the Facebook group, that you do jump in and check out my Facebook group. The group is just Jenny Hayes, JennieHays. Have you ever considered how everyday choices could be influencing your health? Drop a comment with thoughts or suspicions. Is there something? I mean, we all have those things that we know we shouldn't do, like I think the comments today, we had somebody who went and ate a huge baked potato and someone else was having ice cream. And those are the things that we know. But is there something that you've been told is healthy that you're wondering, is this really working for me? I'd love to see that in comments. So why does it matter what causes insulin resistance? I mean, once you're diagnosed, right? Well, the cause is super important because if you don't understand the cause, you might be doing the wrong things to try to fix it. What comes to my mind is Professor Tim Noakes. Now, Professor Tim Noakes literally wrote the book on why you should eat sugar as a runner, as a high endurance athlete. He wrote, in fact, several books. And he's the reason for a lot of the goops and stuff that you see if you go to Academy. And it's like, oh, eat this sugar right before you're running or while you're biking. And he was a marathon runner. And he was still running 20 miles. I don't know if it was a day or a week. I don't want to lie. But he was running a lot more than I do, on a very regular basis and was in really good shape. Until he went to the doctor and found out he was insulin resistant. And he's like, wait a minute, I'm thin. I exercise all the time. Everything else looks good. How in the world can I be insulin resistant? Well, as he dug in, he figured out that insulin resistance is not just a result of being lazy and fat, which is what the media and what most of our doctors will tell us is the reason. If you would get up off of your butt and if you would quit eating junk, you wouldn't be insulin resistant. Now, I have to say that there is a sliver of truth to that, but there are more things that can cause it. So for anybody who doesn't know, you obviously haven't been following me, but insulin resistance is basically where your body excretes insulin from your pancreas, partially and mostly to move blood sugar out of your bloodstream and put it into cells where it can be used, put it into other cells where it can be stored. Now, that is just one of the many, many, many jobs that insulin has, but it is the one we are most familiar with. Now, when it does that, and it does it well, everything is good. But when we get our sugar levels too high on a regular basis, or we have another interfering factor like what we're going to talk about, the cell itself stops responding to the insulin, and it doesn't want to allow it to put sugar in it. Usually it's too full, but not always. And so then we start to become insulin resistant. The insulin, you just need more and more insulin to get that cell to open the door. And eventually this can become all kinds of things. If you want to see all the different path possibilities, if you'll check out last week's Friday Fundamentals, you will see that it's not just diabetes you need to be worried about, but things like heart disease, Alzheimer's, even things like cancer and autoimmune and all kinds of stuff. So, number one, what is one of the biggest problems or causes of insulin resistance? Plain and simple, too many carbs and sugars. We start out from a very young age. So as soon as you move off of formula or breast milk, and we'll actually talk about those in a little bit too, one of the first things your parents start doing is giving you baby foods, and they like to give you the fruit. And I was still eating the fruit maybe when I was in high school because it's so good. And maybe because we were high schoolers, but you start off with fruit and then you move into the teething biscuits and you eat a lot of mashed potatoes. And then you get a little bigger and you start with the chicken nuggets and the fries. And then it's the sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with chips. Just about everything you eat as a child is going to have some carbs in it. And when we were growing up, more so, I think, than some of the kids now, I think it's an economic split. But really, you have the kids that get no sugar, and then you have the kids that only eat sugar. Even orange juice. We all picture orange juice as being this healthy, wonderful drink. And when you research orange juice, you find out the reason that orange juice was even created was not because we all need more vitamin C and orange juice in our life. It was because they had all of these oranges that they couldn't get rid of. And they were like, oh, well, let's just squeeze them and sell the juice. Orange juice actually has more sugar in it than a can of Coke. It's a lot of sugar. So we're eating this sugar, eating these carbs, and for a long time we can tolerate it, but eventually it puts us over the edge and we just can't keep up. And so that is the most common cause of insulin resistance. That is also the easiest to fix. And by easiest, meaning that we literally reverse that process. We cut down on the carbs and the sugars, take them out of our diet, and allow the body to heal. Seed oils. Now, this has become a really big thing in the last year. I actually first heard Nina Teckles talk about seed oils, about 4 years ago, maybe 5. And I'll tell you that the science, as far as in causing insulin resistance, is still up in the air. But there are some suspicious things that are out there that are enough to make you think, okay? And what it's looking like. Right now, we know that the seed oils, especially if they're highly processed, so your corn oil, your safflower oils, your vegetable oils, not as much your avocado or olive oil, things that when you press them are actually greasy. And so therefore you don't have to do a whole lot to create oil. Whereas corn, when you squeeze a kernel of corn, your hand just gets wet. They have to go through, I'm not 1,000, but a whole lot of processes to try to squeeze oil out of it, including chemical treatments and bleaching and all this other stuff. Those are the oils that we know contribute to heart disease. We think that those are also contributing to insulin resistance. We're not 100% sure yet. We do know that these highly processed oils, in fact, all oils go rancid very quickly. Rancid meaning they go bad, they go stale. And when they go stale, some of the chemicals change and become toxic. And then we also know that when you cook with oil, especially a highly processed oil, that they become toxic very quickly. So like in your fast food, not only are you getting high temperatures, but they're reusing it over and over again. It's full of poisons, absolutely full of poisons. And it has made it a lot harder to enjoy going out and having that occasional fried food, by all means. We don't have as much of those toxins created when you use a saturated fat, something like lard, to cook in. And so just a side note, if you're going to splurge and have French fries, cook them at home in lard or beef tallow, and they taste better anyway. So seed oils are a big question mark. I avoid them for other reasons, but there is some emerging literature that says it could be an issue. Obesity. Now, I just told you that being fat and lazy wasn't the cause of insulin resistance. But here's the sliver of obesity that causes a problem. So when our fat cells enlarge, they actually contribute to insulin resistance. They actually produce hormones. I mean, we think of fat cells as just a storage unit, but they're actually functioning cells. And they're part of the reason that the insulin becomes resistant. Because here's the thing, when that fat cell gets full and it can't take any more in, then insulin keeps trying to push it in anyway. And it says, here, I have more sugar in the blood. Can you please turn this into fat so I can get it out of the blood? Because we know blood sugar, when it's too high, is dangerous, deadly immediately. So it has to create more and more and more insulin to get it shoved in that fat cell. So obesity can cause insulin resistance. And insulin resistance can cause obesity. Because if the muscle cells that need the sugar are not taking it in, they've got to put it somewhere. And so they start filling up those fat cells. If you ever doubt that insulin can cause obesity, just do a Google search for people that have injected insulin into their bodies and not changed locations. So one of the things we teach people when they start doing insulin injections is never inject in the same area twice. You want to rotate on a regular basis. And the picture that comes to mind is this young person with relatively thin legs, and then there's these two that look like huge tumors coming off. And it's not tumors, that's just fat deposits from the insulin. It's crazy. Lack of exercise. Now, again, we talked about that in the beginning. This is that sliver. You do not have to exercise to reverse insulin resistance and or diabetes. Promise, you don't have to. But if you are not exercising, then when the sugar goes into the muscle cell, it sits there. When you exercise, it uses that energy. And so it's got an empty spot so you can get more insulin in. So therefore, by nature of just it being full, if you're not utilizing what's in the muscle cell, then you can't put more in unless you have more insulin yelling at that muscle cell, hey, I've got to get rid of this, open the doors. Okay, so having a sedentary lifestyle can help to lead to insulin resistance. Medications. Now, this is one that many people don't know, but there are a whole slew of medications that increase your likelihood of becoming insulin resistant. There's some that are, some HIV treatments, some psych drugs. So depending on what antidepressant you're on, that could actually increase your risk. Steroids is an obvious one if you've ever been on steroids, and it's for a couple of reasons. Not only does it increase your blood sugar just by nature of the drug, but it also causes carb cravings like crazy. Some diuretics, depending on what kind they are. Insulin itself causes insulin resistance, which makes it really crazy that we use insulin for diabetics. And then the most surprising one is statins. Hold on one second. My robot decided to come in here to clean, and it is going to be too loud. So give me 1 second. I will tell it to go elsewhere. Come on. Just pause it. That'll take just a second. Other things, medical conditions. So there are actually some medical conditions that can lead you to insulin resistance. They're very rare. But, Cushing's, hypothyroidism. And if you think about the hypothyroidism, in addition to some other factors, makes you not move around as much, not have as much energy. And so therefore you're not moving as much out. So you can't move as much into the cell, right? And then tumors of the pituitary or adrenal gland, depending on what kind they are, they can make things worse also. Genetics. Now, this is the one that for a while we were blaming everything on, right? Oh, it's in my genes. I can't do anything about it. I'm just stuck, right? There are people who are more genetically susceptible to insulin resistance. It doesn't mean that you're going to be. It doesn't mean that you have to be. And it doesn't give us an excuse if we are. And so there's a really cool thing that they've learned about genes in the last, well, they probably learned it before I did, at least the last 10 years, is that what we do, what we eat, the toxins we're exposed to, how we live our life, we can actually turn the genes off and on for things. So you might be genetically disposed to becoming diabetic, insulin resistant, but you have the ability to turn that gene back off. That's really cool. And it gives you a sense of control. It really does. Because here's one of the final things that can cause insulin resistance. And I do not want anybody out there who has children who are insulin resistant or diabetic to take on any guilt. Okay? You don't know what you don't know until you do. But mothers can pass the susceptibility for insulin resistance and diabetic onto their kids based on what they were eating and their lifestyle before they got pregnant, while they were pregnant, and while they were breastfeeding. And a lot of that goes back to the diet pieces and the epigenetics pieces. So when you are creating that life, yes, those eggs were already created many, 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 many years ago, back when you were in utero. But you can still turn off and on genes in that child while they're depending on you for life. That to me is one of the most surprising pieces, is that we are so susceptible that even that young, we can be set up for success or failure. But really what it boils down to is what we do with that information now. If you're insulin resistant, what are you going to do about it now? And that's what we're going to start getting into next Friday. We're going to do a general overview of the top 3, actually the only 3 clinically proven ways that you can reverse insulin resistance. And then I'm also going to dive into I can't see anybody's name. All I see is Facebook user. Sorry. I was using an outline, so I stay on par. So is there a test to see if you're insulin resistant? Yes. It depends on how far along in the insulin resistance you are. So if you are at a level where it's detectable, then you can do a fasting insulin level, and that's going to tell you a lot. And then you can do a what they call a postprandial blood sugar. Now, you don't go to your doctor and ask for a postprandial blood sugar because he's going to look at you like you just grew something out of your forehead. What you ask for is a fasting blood glucose And then you make sure to eat. Oh, hi, Tammy. Tammy and I actually went to high school together, or really middle school. She left for high school. But you actually will eat 2 hours before the blood draw. If you eat 2 hours before the blood draw and your fasting blood sugar comes back and it is high, you can guarantee that you are insulin resistant. If you are earlier than that, then it's going to be hard to tell. There is, I keep forgetting, I remember it as soon as I'm off camera. There is a specific type of insulin test that's really only done in labs that are doing studies that can tell. But if you have any signs of any inflammatory diseases, so things like migraines, eye problems, other than just typical, you're born with nearsighted or farsighted, or if you're losing your hair, if you have allergies, if you have chronic sinus infections, if you have tinnitus, so ringing of the ears, they have found that tinnitus is actually very early insulin resistance. If you have a lot of cavities in your mouth, that would be one of mine that I wasn't aware of when I was growing up. If you find that your voice has lowered over the years, if you have reflux, if you have IBS, if you have asthma, and it wasn't a childhood diagnosis, if you have arthritis, autoimmune, cancer, trying to go through as many as I can, PCOS, infertility. Did I say arthritis yet? Arthritis, gout, eczema, psoriasis. Basically, if you have a disease, you might want to check and see if it's a sign of insulin resistance. And it sounds crazy, and I always feel like I'm selling snake oil. Really, I mean, truly. But the reality is that these diseases have become more and more common, and people are baffled. It's like, why is this so common now all of a sudden? And it's our diet. It's what we eat. So, like I said, we're going to dive into that a little bit more, how we can actually do something about it next Friday. If you are looking for a strategy for yourself, something personalized, and you just kind of want to get some next steps, I have a free a strategy call, insulin resistant strategy call. This is the link. So jennyhayes.info/FB live. Happy to jump on the phone with you, or Zoom call. I really prefer Zoom. For 15 minutes, there's no charge. There's no expectation. It really, truly is a service that I do for everybody. Everybody gets one free. And then if at the end of that call, we decide that we want to discuss working together, we'll go forward on that. But I would love to have you all call and talk. Yeah, I see, Tammy, you mowed. Yeah, I love peanut butter and jelly. There is actually a bread. If you go to the Charlie Foundation and look up macadamia nut bread, and then you take any kind of a nut butter. I like pecan butter, and you put a little bit of salt and a little bit of whatever your sweetener is. Don't use honey. Don't use maple syrup. Don't use regular sugar. Put that in your peanut butter. And then there is a recipe on YouTube, Victoria's Kitchen, for a jelly, a grape jelly that has like 1 gram of carbs, I think, per serving. And it makes a pretty good peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So, especially if it's been a while. All right, so yeah, Tammy, email me or DM me, and we'll get together. And then anybody else, check out the link. And hope you all have a wonderful day. Wishing you health and happiness.